The wind howled off the shivering sea, its cry a dirge for all that was lost, and all that might yet be won. In the grey pre-dawn, the masts of the Iron Fleet stood like a forest of bone, black sails furled and shivering, as men stalked the deck of the sea bitch with axes and daggers, preparing for what was to come. Theon Greyjoy stood at the prow, his hands gripping the cold iron rail, eyes fixed northward, toward home, toward the firelit sprawl of Winterfell, that ancient wolf's den of ice and memory. He was not the boy who had left Pike at his father's call, nor the broken shell who had slunk through those halls as Ramsay's prey. He was changed, honed by cruelty and pain, but not shattered by them. For all that the drowned god had taken, something harder had been forged in the void. Theon Greyjoy, Prince of the Iron Islands, was coming home. Not to conquer, not this time, but to redeem, and to fight for the last place in the world that had ever called him brother. The fleet cut silent through the fog, hugging the treacherous shallows of the Barrowlands, skirting the pale lights of Bolton outriders. Theon's companions, Asha, the fierce-eyed, iron-willed sister who had never stopped believing he could be more than a traitor. Dagmar Cleftjaw, old and gnarled as driftwood but as unyielding. Black Lauren and Carl the Maid, and a score of Ironborn killers, each with blood debts to settle, manned the ships, eyes hungry for battle. But their war was not for plunder. It was for something harder to seize, something that could not be bought or stolen, a home reclaimed, a wrong made right. They drew near the mouth of the White Knife as the sky began to burn with the first pale blush of morning. Winterfell rose beyond the mists, its towers black against the snow, its walls ringed with the banners of House Bolton and their turncloak allies. Fires burned within, though not for warmth. A siege was underway. The Starks, it was rumored, still clung to life inside, ringed by steel and starvation. Theon's heart clenched at the thought of Sansa, of Bran and Rickon. Hosts he had lost, now possibly within his grasp once more. Asha drew beside him, her face shadowed by the furred hood. "It's madness," she said quietly. "Even with the ships, we're few. The Boltons are strong and hungry for blood." Theon did not look at her. "They will not expect us. Not from the water, not with the rivers frozen near solid. We land at the east gate beneath the cover of the reeds. The moat is thin there. Our axes can cut the ice, if it comes to it." She eyed him, proud and wary both. "And then what? Save the wolves and be damned by our father? If any of us live to see Pike again, the old Kraken will hang us for treason." "Now," Theon's voice was raw. "Let him. This is not for him. It is for me. For what I did. For what I could never do. Until now." Dagmar joined them, axe in hand. "Bolton's men'll be drunk and sure. You've the right of it, lad. A blade in the dark will serve us better than a war horn at dawn. But once we're in, we'll need more than axes and hope. We'll need the Starks." A thin, bitter smile curled Theon's lips. "Then, let us find them. And may the old gods forgive me if they cannot." No. The fleet split, 3 ships making for the muddy bank beneath the broken eastern wall. Theon was first onto the shore, his boots sinking into the rotten ice, water seeping cold through his leather greaves. The air stank of death and wood smoke. From within the walls, the clash of steel and the bark of orders echoed. Bolton men, lazy in their vigilance, confident the Ironborn would not come so far from their waves. But the wolves had taught Theon to move in silence, to kill with the patience of snow. They moved through the reeds, ghosts in the half-light, and found the postern gate unguarded. Black Lauren cut the first sentry's throat before he could raise a cry. Dagmar set to work on the hinges with oil and wire. Within minutes, the gate yawned open, and a score of Ironborn poured through, silent as midnight tide. Winterfell within was chaos. Half the great keep was fire-gutted from the last sack, and the walls wept black with frost. In the courtyard, Bolton men drank by barrels, careless in their victory. Theon led his crew through the shadows, dispatching stragglers with axe and dagger. The old gods watched, silent from the weirwood, their faces weeping red. Theon felt their gaze burn him, but he did not flinch. He found Maester Luwin first, crumpled in the godswood, a broken reed in a sea of snow. Theon knelt, blood staining his gloves. "Maester," he whispered. "Is there hope?" Luwin's eyes, rheumy and bright, found him. "You, Theon Greyjoy, come back to haunt me. To fight, Maester. For the Starks. Where are they?" Faint, pained smile. "In the crypts. Sansa.id. Rickon.ie. The last of them. Hiding, praying. You may yet save them, if you have the courage you never showed." "Menand." Theon rose, his chest tight. "I do, Maester, or I will die trying." They moved swiftly, the Ironborn fanning out, blades gleaming in the torchlight. Asha covered the gates. Dagmar led a sortie to disable the Bolton's warhorns. Theon and Black Lauren slipped down the spiral stairs beneath the old tombs, where the air was thick with dust and the memory of wolves. The crypts were colder than the grave, and darker still. Theon called softly, "Sansa." "Rickon?" "Bran, if you yet live." For a moment, nothing. Then, from behind a tomb, a girl's face, pale, grim, defiant. Sansa.d. Older than he remembered, but unbroken. She stared at him with open hatred. Traitor, kinslayer. Theon swallowed. "Yes, I was. I'm here now to make it right. My men hold the gate. We can get you out. But you must trust me, Sansa. Just this once." Beside her, Rickon clung to her skirts, wild-eyed. A boy grown half-feral by fear. Behind them, a hunched figure in furs. Osha, the wildling woman, knife bared. Sansa did not move. "Why would I trust you? You killed my brothers. You betrayed us all." Theon's voice cracked. "I never killed them. Not Bran, not Rickon. I let them go. I lied to save them. The bodies, they were farm boys. My shame, my sin, but not murder." "Please, Sansa. There is no time." Osha growled, but Sansa hesitated, searching his face. At last, she nodded. "If you lie, I will see you die before the day is done." Theon managed a broken laugh. "So be it, my lady." He led them up into the keep, through smoke and ruin. The Ironborn were everywhere now, axes biting into Bolton flesh, torches flaring in the halls. Above, the great hall blazed with fire. Bolton banners torn from the rafters, the flayed man cast into the flames. Ramsay Snow was not so easily taken. The bastard came at them like a beast, mad with blood, dogs snapping at his heels. Theon faced him on the broken steps of the great hall, the specter of his tormentor. Ramsay's eyes shone with black delight. "Come back for another taste, Reek? Or did you forget how to crawl?" Theon felt the old terror claw at him, but he did not yield. "My name is Theon Greyjoy. I am Ironborn, and I am done with fear." He swung his axe. Ramsay parried with his cruel blade, laughing. They circled, steel flashing in the smoky light, until Black Lauren barreled in, driving the bastard back. Ramsay shrieked, knife flashing, but the numbers were against him. He fell beneath Lauren's blade, screaming, and the dogs fled into the snow. It was done. The Ironborn had taken Winterfell, but not for themselves. The gates were opened, and Sansa and Rickon emerged into the sunlight, blinking, battered but alive. The small folk crept from hiding, blinking at the Ironborn with fear and awe. Word spread like wildfire through the north. The Boltons were broken, the wolves returned. Theon stood atop the battlements as the sun rose, the wind tearing at his cloak. Sansa came to stand beside him, eyes hard. "Why?" she asked. "Why now?" He looked north, toward the land of his childhood, the land that had shaped and scarred him. "I have been many things," he said softly. "A traitor, a coward, a fool. But I would not die all of those things. I wanted to do one good thing before the end. For you, for Winterfell." She studied him, the hint of something like understanding in her eyes. "Perhaps you have, perhaps not. Time will tell." He nodded. "It always does." Word spread quickly across the north. House Manderley, the Umbers. the tall men of House Karstark. Each sent riders, hopeful, uncertain, to see if the wolf banners would fly again. Some called Theon a hero, others a kinslayer. But all knew the world had changed. Winterfell was no longer a tomb. It was a rallying cry. Asha Greyjoy, for her part, prepared her ships for departure. "We did what we came for," she told Theon. "But Pike will not forgive, nor will it forget. Father's wrath will follow us to the ends of the earth." "Nendasal," Theon shrugged. "Let it come. I will not run from it. Not anymore." Dagmar grinned. "Well spoken, lad. There's iron in you yet." In the days that followed, Theon stayed in Winterfell, aiding Maester Luwin in healing the wounded, helping Sansa and Rickon assert their rule. The lords of the north gathered, some to pledge, some to test, all to wonder what kind of world might grow from the ashes of so much pain. Sansa proved as shrewd as her mother, her voice clear and strong in the great hall, while Rickon, fierce and wild, rode with the old wolfhounds in the fields. Theon kept his distance, knowing his place was never truly among them. Yet sometimes, when the wind was soft and the snow fell gentle, he would find Sansa gazing at the old godswood, and she would nod at him, just once, in silent thanks. Asha departed in time, taking a handful of Ironborn back to the sea. Their task done, their debt repaid, Black Lauren and Dagmar remained, sworn to Theon's service, their axes at his side. Letters went out to the Vale, to the Riverlands, even to the Wall, where rumors of death rising in the snow grew stronger by the day. The north was battered, but alive. The wolves were not extinct. The Ironborn had saved Winterfell, not for gold nor for glory, but for something older, deeper, a chance at forgiveness, a glimpse of the man Theon might have been, had the world been kinder. On a cold, clear morning, Theon stood once more before the heart tree, its face red with sap, its eyes deep as the sea. He knelt, not in prayer, but in acceptance. He had done what he could. He had made his choice. A raven cawed overhead, black wings slicing the sky. Theon rose, turning toward the keep, toward the faint sound of laughter from within. For the first time in many years, he felt almost whole. He walked back into Winterfell, and the gate closed softly behind him, as if the old stones, too, had forgiven at last. A.K. Snow fell with the sluggish heaviness of late winter, muting the scars of battle across Winterfell's battered stones. The land itself seemed to mourn and heal, a hush settling over the keep, as if the old gods themselves drew in a breath. Yet beneath the quiet, life began to move again, where Boltons and their carrion men had ruled by terror and blade. The rhythm of the north, the hammering of the blacksmith, the cries of children in the bailey, the soft, insistent prayers at the heart tree. Return. Theon wandered the corridors alone at first, half expecting to see ghostly shades of his past at every turn. He saw himself, younger and so sure, mocking Bran's bulwark in the yard. He saw the gray eyes of Eddard Stark, full of a stern kindness that had wounded him more deeply than any blade. He saw, too, the shadow of a boy who'd once dared to believe that love might come to him by right, who had thought a wolf pack could accept a kraken as its own. Those ghosts watched him now. Silent judges, and Theon could not look away. On the third night, as a blizzard howled outside, and the walls groaned with cold, he found Sansa in the solar, alone save for a single flickering candle. The fire was little more than embers, yet she did not shiver. Her hair was unbound, a dark river falling over her shoulders. She did not turn when he entered. Theon hesitated, then stepped inside, closing the door against the wind. "I thought you'd gone," she said at last, her voice quiet. He cleared his throat. "My sister's gone back to Pike. I stayed." She glanced at him, her eyes unreadable. "You could have left with her. No one would have stopped you." "I know," he said, "but I had nowhere to go." He hesitated, then added, "I don't think I belong anywhere. But if I must haunt one place, let it be this one. I owe it. And you." Sansa looked away, her mouth a flat line. You owe us more than you can pay." He nodded. "I know, but I mean to try. I know how the Boltons thought, what they did, where their men might flee. I can help you, if you'll let me." "Many." She was silent for a long moment, weighing him as one might a strange hound. Half wild, but loyal. There are still traitors among the small folk, she said. "Those who'd sell us for a crust of bread. Rickon is frightened of his own shadow, and the lords will not come unless they see strength in Winterfell. They do not trust me, or a boy, and they will never trust you." Theon stared into the fire, watching the coals pulse red. "No, Dot. But if I can bring you their heads, the last of the Boltons, the ones who slipped away. If I can show the North that Winterfell is strong, maybe then they'll follow you." She glanced up, lips pressed thin. "And why would you do this for me?" The question stung. He could not say it was love. He could not name what he felt for her. For the wolves, for this place. It was as much guilt as longing, a need to make right what he had ruined. "Because I remember who you were before," he said softly. "And who I was. Because I'd rather die fighting for you than live with what I've been." "Then?" A breath. A flutter of lashes then. "Very well. Prove it." The days that followed were cruel. A cold trial by wind and blood. Theon gathered what remained of the Ironborn. Dagmar, Lauren. A handful of men with axes and bitter hearts. And set out beneath the banners of the wolf. Sansa watched them ride from the gates, Rickon at her side, his little hand crushed in hers. Theon met her eyes once, and saw a flicker of hope there, pale as the northern sun. Their quarry was not hard to find. Bolton men were wolves without a pack. Scattered, starving, easy to track by the smoke of stolen fires, and the cries of the folk they preyed upon. Theon knew their tricks. He led his party through the woods like a huntsman, silent as the falling snow. They caught the first band near the King's Road, a half-dozen men too drunk to fight, their leader ranting about the return of the Deerwolves. Dagmar's axe finished it quickly. At night, they camped beneath the frozen limbs of old trees, the Ironborn taking turns at watch. Dagmar would stare at Theon across the fire, the old man's face a ruin of scars. "Why do you do this, boy?" he asked one night. "You could have run south, taken ship for the free cities. You have coin enough." Theon shook his head. "Running is all I've done. I'd rather die here trying to make something right." Dagmar spat. "You'll die, aye. But there's no right at the end of a sword. Only steel and silence." Theon smiled bitterly. "Then let me have my silence." By the time they returned to Winterfell, 3 days later, dragging 3 bound survivors behind their horses, word had spread of their deeds. Small folk cheered as they passed. Some spat. Most simply watched, wary, but no longer afraid. Theon dragged the prisoners before Sansa in the great hall, where the Stark banners flew again. She sat on the high seat, Rickon on her right, Maester Luwin on her left. Theon knelt before her, head bowed. "My lady Dotwal, the last of the Boltons who dared show their faces. What is your will?" "Da." Sansa studied the men, broken, bloodied, muttering prayers. Her eyes were ice. "They murdered our kin. They burned the north. They deserve death." Theon nodded. "Then let it be by northern law. Let the people see you judge them, not me. Let them see us Stark again." So it was done. Sansa gave the command, and the prisoners were led to the yard. Theon stood behind her as she pronounced sentence, her voice ringing out. "You betrayed House Stark. You murdered and burned. By the laws of the North, you were sentenced to die. Then," she gave the sword to Rickon, whose hand shook as he passed it to Theon. It was ice, reforged, shining with the firelight. Theon looked to Sansa, who nodded once. He took the blade, and as he struck the final blow, he felt something loosen inside him. A knot of fear years old, slipping free at last. The lords began to come. Wyman Manderley arrived with 100 men, his banners white and blue, his chin stained with grease from the journey. He greeted Sansa with warmth, Rickon with gruff affection. Theon with wary respect. Next came Howland Reed, gaunt and silent, with a handful of green men from the neck. The Karstarks sent a delegation, as did the tall Umbers, though their words were full of warning and old anger. They met in the great hall, the banners of wolf and kraken both displayed. Sansa spoke first, calm and measured, reminding them of their oaths, of the price the North had paid, and the blood yet to be avenged. Some balked, Karstark most of all. How can we trust the man who sacked Winterfell? How do we know he will not turn again? And now, Theon stood then, before them all, his hair tangled, face drawn, but eyes clear. You cannot trust me, he said, but you can trust my sword and my shame. I do not ask to be forgiven. I ask to fight for Winterfell. When the dead come, as they surely will, you will need every blade, even mine. The lords muttered. Manderly nodded. Let the kraken earn his keep, I say. If he turns again, we hang him from the walls. Bemda send. Sansa gave her blessing, and Theon was given command of the outer defenses, repairing the broken walls, drilling the peasantry, setting traps along the road. He worked night and day, pushing himself until his hands bled. The small folk began to murmur, first with suspicion, then with something closer to admiration. He never asked for thanks, only for work, and for loyalty to Winterfell, not to himself. He found Rickon watching him one afternoon as he oversaw the men digging spikes into the snowdrifts. Why do you work so hard? Rickon asked, his voice thin as the wind. Mother said you were a liar. Theon crouched beside him. I was once. I did many bad things, Rickon. But I wanted to do good now. For your mother, for your father, for you. Rickon's eyes, wolf bright, regarded him. You won't leave us again? Theon shook his head. Not unless I must. And if I do, I will come back. I promise. Rickon nodded, as if this settled some old question, and wandered off to play with the hounds. Spring came slow and grudging to the north. The snows melted, rivers breaking free with sudden violence. News came from the south. War still raged, Lannister against Tyrell, Cersei clinging to the Iron Throne with bloody hands. But here, at the edge of the world, another war brewed. Rumors of dead things walking in the woods, of wildlings fleeing the wall, of the Night's Watch, shattered and scattered. One night, a rider appeared at the gate, black-clad and near frozen. It was Jon Snow, Lord Commander no more, his sword Longclaw crusted with old blood, his eyes hollow with grief. Sansa wept to see him. Rickon flung himself into Jon's arms. Theon hung back, ashamed. But Jon crossed the hall to him and grasped his shoulder. You saved them, Jon said quietly. I know what that cost. Thank you, Theon. Theon could not speak, so he only nodded. Jon brought grim news. The wall was breached, the dead poured south, and only Winterfell stood between them and the living world. The lords gathered in the hall, grim-faced, and Jon spoke of wights and white walkers, of dragons in the sky and queens at war. Sansa listened, and when Jon finished, she looked to Theon. You know the land. You know how the Boltons fought, how the Ironborn strike. How do we hold Winterfell? No, he told them. He spoke of ditches filled with oil, of spike pits and narrow ways, of fire and hammer and the fighting retreat. He spoke as one who had lived through siege and fire, who had seen what men and monsters could do. The lords listened and nodded. Theon's voice carried, and for the first time, none questioned his right to be heard. Preparations began in earnest. The walls were strengthened. The smiths forged weapons day and night. The women and children were sent to the crypts, and the oldest men taught the youngest how to wield a blade. Theon moved through it all like a shadow, always working, never resting. Sansa watched him from the walls, her eyes softer now, as if seeing not a traitor but a comrade. On the eve of battle, as the fires burned along the ramparts, Theon found Sansa again in the Godswood. She knelt before the heart tree, her breath a white plume in the dark. He knelt beside her. Are you afraid? She nodded. Of what's coming, of losing what little we've regained. He touched her hand. We will not lose, not while one of us stands. She looked at him, and something broke in her eyes, a dam of grief and fury and hope. She squeezed his hand. If I live, Theon, I will remember what you've done. If I die, I will remember it still." He bowed his head. "That is all I can ask." The horns sounded then, long and mournful, echoing across the snow. The dead had come. They stood atop the walls, side by side, Stark and Snow and Greyjoy, united by pain and purpose. The whites came in waves, endless and unceasing, and the night was filled with fire and blood and the screams of the dying. Theon led the defense at the east gate, where the ice was thickest. He fought like a man possessed, his axe rising and falling, his voice ringing out above the din. He saw Jon fall, surrounded by whites, and rushed to his side, dragging him clear. He saw Rickon, wielding a dagger half his size, standing over the body of a slain White Walker. He saw Sansa in the great hall, rallying the women and old men, her courage a beacon in the darkness. When dawn broke, Winterfell still stood. The dead lay in heaps before the gates, smoldering where fire had taken them. Many had died, Karstarks, Umbers, Ironborn and small folk, but enough survived. The living had won. For now. The survivors gathered in the yard. Jon embraced Theon, whispering his thanks. Sansa found him, her face streaked with soot and tears, and pressed her lips to his brow. "You saved us," she said. "You saved Winterfell." He shook his head. "I only did what I should have done long ago." She smiled then, the first true smile he had seen from her since childhood. As spring crept north, the land slowly healed. The wolves ruled Winterfell again, and the Kraken found a place among them. Not as brother, perhaps, but as friend, as protector, as the man he had always hoped to become. And so, when the winds of war blew once more, Theon Greyjoy stood with the wolves, ready to face whatever darkness might come. His past forgiven, his debt repaid, his place in the world finally truly earned. Oh, Kandi. The banners of House Stark snapped in the thawing wind, pale direwolves rampant against snowy fields, flanked by the blue and white of Manderley, the red sunburst of Karstark, and the gray-green reeds of House Reed. All across the north, the ravens bore the same message. Winterfell stood and called its banners to war. The long night had broken for now, but in its wake, the scars of survival twisted across the land. Villages burned, fields stripped bare, houses left empty but for the dead. Yet within Winterfell, there was breath and hope again. The men and women who had survived the siege and the onslaught of the dead clung to each other and to the faint promise of spring. The old gods watched in silence, their faces carved deep with sorrow and expectation, as the children of men set about rebuilding what winter and war had torn asunder. Theon Greyjoy awoke before dawn as he always did, restless and raw. The bed in the guest chambers was too soft, the blankets too fine, comforts he had not earned. Sleep eluded him, hunted away by dreams of drowning and fire. Some nights he heard the roaring surf of Pike, others the screams in the dungeons below Dreadfort, and always the voice of his father. What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. He rose and dressed, pulling on a patched surcoat, and made his way through the silent halls. The keep was thick with the scent of tallow and old stone, the air sharp and cold even with the hearths burning low. In the bailey, Dagmar Cleftjaw was already at work, drilling a fresh clutch of green boys and old men. Theon watched for a while, correcting a lad's grip, showing another the trick of parrying low. Dagmar gave him a rare, lopsided grin. "Fighting in the daylight now, eh?" the old man rasped. "Didn't think I'd live to see it. Greyjoy teaching wolves their claws." Theon returned the smile, feeling the ache in his jaw where a Bolton axe had clipped him days before. Better me than letting them cut their own feet off. We'll need every sword sharp if more dead come. Or worse, if the Lannisters remember we exist. Then too. Dagmar grunted approval and turned back to his charges, barking at them to keep their shields up, to trust their neighbors. Theon moved on, pausing to survey the battered walls. Masons from White Harbor toiled with mud and stone, patching breaches, raising new towers where the old ones had fallen. Beyond the gates, Small folk from across the north gathered in a rough camp, rebuilding what they could, learning to trust the shadow of the great castle once again. Inside, the rhythms of daily life had begun to return. In the kitchens, women baked loaves and boiled stews. The smell drifted into the hallways, stirring hunger in every belly. Rickon chased the hounds through the snow, his wild laughter echoing off the ramparts. Sansa presided over the solar, issuing orders and writing letters. Her voice calm, her eyes always measuring, always waiting for the next threat. Maester Luwin saw to the wounded and sick, mixing poultices, mending broken limbs, offering gentle words to the frightened and grieving. Theon made himself useful wherever he could, organizing patrols, escorting refugees, mapping the land for signs of foraging bands or fresh snowmelt. He had no official title, no claim to the Stark household, but the castle folk began to nod to him. Some in thanks, others in wary respect. Even the lords, those who had survived, began to see him as something more than a traitor, if not quite a Northman. One afternoon, as he patrolled the eastern curtain wall, he found Sansa overlooking the yard, her fingers white around the stone balustrade. Below, a group of small folk pleaded for firewood, their voices desperate. Sansa's face was pale, her mouth set in a thin line. "We haven't enough for all," she said softly as Theon drew near. "I must choose who gets to be warm and who will freeze. I hate it." Theon leaned beside her. "That's the way of ruling. Choosing which deaths matter. But it doesn't make you a monster. Only a Stark." She looked at him then, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and memory. "Sometimes I wish I could go back to before, when all I wanted was pretty dresses, songs, and a prince to save me. Now every day is blood and bone and hunger. There's no one left to save me." He hesitated, then said, "You've saved yourself, Sansa, and you've saved the rest of us too." She shook her head, a small, rueful smile flickering. "Not alone." Her gaze found his. "I'm glad you stayed, Theon, no matter what the others say." They stood in silence, the wind cold on their faces, the castle at their feet. At length, Sansa turned away, her skirts trailing over the ancient stones. Theon watched her go, heart heavy with what could never be spoken, and then turned back to his duties. Days stretched into weeks, and the scars of battle began to fade. Some of the Ironborn who had remained grew restless. Black Lauren pressed Theon to send a raven to Pike, to beg the old Kraken's mercy, to bring more ships north. Asha's absence was a hollow space Theon felt with every morning. He could not summon the courage to write her, or to their father. He knew what Balon Greyjoy would say: "No son of mine kneels for a wolf." But he had no wish to return to the islands. The salt air would never scrub away his guilt. Here in the snow, in the shadow of the direwolf, perhaps he could build something new. Trouble came, as trouble always does, riding in with the first thaw of the new spring. A company of Karstark men rode hard for the gates, banners flapping, shields battered, faces grim. They brought with them a prisoner, a young man, scarcely older than Rickon, but tall and thin, with dark hair hacked short and fear bright in his eyes. Sansa greeted them in the yard, Jon and Theon flanking her. The Karstark captain dismounted and knelt. "My lady, we found this one in the woods near Last Hearth, running with a band of broken men. He claims he's a Stark, says his name is Bran." Now, the world stopped. Sansa's breath caught, her face a mask of disbelief, then desperate hope. Theon stepped forward, unable to help himself. "Bran?" His voice trembled. The boy met his gaze, something ancient flickering in his eyes. Wisdom and sadness far beyond his years. "Hello, Theon," he said. "It's good to see you." A moment of silence, then Sansa rushed forward, tears breaking down her cheeks, Rickon hurtling past to throw himself into his brother's arms. Jon watched, awestruck, as the siblings embraced. Theon hung back, shame and awe warring inside him. Later, in the great hall, as food and wine flowed and every heart lightened, Bran told his story, of a long journey north of the wall, of magic and memory, of a world beyond the reach of even the oldest songs. He spoke little of hardship, and less of suffering. But Theon saw the distance in his eyes, the touch of cold that never quite left him. When the feast waned and the others withdrew, Theon found Bran alone by the weirwood, staring up at the red leaves. "I never meant for any of it," Theon said, words thick with regret. "I lied. I failed you. But I never wanted." Bran smiled, distant and kind. "You are not who you were, Theon. None of us are. The world has changed. Let it." They stood together in the stillness. The old gods watched. Silent and implacable, as if bearing witness to something rare. A kind of forgiveness that could only be born in the ashes of the world. With Bran's return, the North found new strength. The old lords rallied in earnest, pledging their swords not only to Sansa, but to the ancient blood that ran in her brother's veins. Jon's warnings of the undead were heeded now with more gravity. Patrols doubled along the King's Road and White Knife. Messengers rode day and night to gather supplies, to urge the folk of every holdfast to seek shelter behind Winterfell's walls. Yet with hope came new threats. In the spring rains, word reached them of Lannister armies regrouping in the south, of Queen Cersei's rage, of new fleets stirring on the seas. The Iron Bank of Bravos sent a courier to collect on old debts. And always, the wild tales from the east, dragons in the sky, a queen in fire and chain, armies on the march. In the Godswood one evening, as dusk bled through the branches, Theon found Jon brooding on a bench, long claw laid across his knees. "Bran says there's more to come," Jon said, his voice flat. "He dreams of ice and fire, of a storm greater than any before. He says the living will need every sword, even those thought lost." Theon nodded. "He's right. The North will stand with you, Jon. The Ironborn too. Those that stayed. I'll see to it." Jon's lips twisted. "Do you think we can win? Against death itself?" Theon met his eyes, old pain burning in his chest. "I don't know. But I'd rather die with you than hide on an island, pretending the world isn't burning. We fight, or we fall." Jon clapped him on the shoulder, the ghost of a smile haunting his face. "We fight." The next weeks were a storm of preparation. The halls filled with new faces, wildlings led by Tormund Giantsbane, sworn to Jon by bonds of fire and blood. Knights from the Vale, sent by Sansa's cousin Robin Arryn, eager for glory. Even a handful of wizards and learned men from Old Town, seeking the truth in old books and older bones. The Ironborn took to the rivers and lakes, setting watchfires and traps, patrolling the flanks for any sign of trouble. One night, as Theon patrolled the ramparts, he found Sansa waiting, wrapped in a cloak of direwolf fur. She looked out over the campfires, thousands of points of light burning against the endless dark. "Do you ever wish you could leave?" she asked. Theon shook his head. "No. The sea's in my blood, but it brings only ghosts. Here, I have purpose. Here, I can fight for something greater than myself." She regarded him, her face softened by the firelight. "You've changed, Theon. I can see it, even if others cannot." He bowed his head, uncertain how to answer. She touched his hand, just briefly. "Stay with us. When the fighting is done, if we survive, there will be a place for you. Not as a lord, perhaps, but as a friend." "Mendemacher." He smiled, the pain of old wounds easing, if only for a moment. "I would like that, my lady." In the night, the winds rose, and the snow fell anew. Winter was not yet done with them. But in the heart of Winterfell, beneath the eyes of the gods, Theon Greyjoy stood among the wolves, ready for whatever darkness might come. And the world, battered and broken, spun onward, toward dawn, toward fire, toward the hope of spring and the memory of all that had been lost and found again. Kea. The cold lingered, stubborn and biting, even as sunlight stretched longer each day across the courtyards of Winterfell. Snow melted in trickling streams along the base of the walls, carving new scars beside the old, but the North's wounds healed slowly. Night after night, bonfires burned on the ramparts and in the fields beyond the gates, a warning and a comfort both. The living watched, ever wary for shadows moving where none should be. Within those walls, the heart of Winterfell pulsed stronger. Theon moved through the castle and the makeshift camp that sprawled outside it, the familiar weight of steel at his hip. The name, Greyjoy, drew both wariness and admiration now, no longer spat as a curse. He was a bridge between worlds. A kraken walking among wolves, a symbol of betrayal and redemption both. Each morning he woke half expecting to find himself unmade, cast out into the snow, but the day always found him with work to do and lives to protect. Rickon, newly wild yet fiercely loyal, trailed him with Shaggy Dog slinking behind. The boy had taken to swords and axes as easily as to howling, yet his grief surfaced in sudden bursts. A sullen silence at dusk, a fistful of snow hurled against the wall for no reason at all. Theon remembered his own boyhood, the fury and confusion, and spoke to Rickon with gentle honesty when he could. A wolf howls for his pack, he told the boy, but he fights for his home. The pack needs you, and so does Winterfell. Rickon's fierce nod was all the answer he needed. Bran's presence in the castle was like a slow-turning wheel, mysterious and unyielding. He wandered at strange hours, speaking quietly with Maester Luwin and the older lords, vanishing for hours to the Godswood or the library. Some said he dreamed of things yet to come. Others whispered of secrets learned beyond the wall, of gifts older than the old gods themselves. Theon did not pry. Instead, he watched Bran in silent awe, wondering if the world could ever be explained by such a boy. Sansa bore the burden of command with measured grace. Her word was law in Winterfell, and lords twice her age now deferred to her. She handled disputes over land and food with a cold decisiveness that would have surprised her southern self. The men of the north, hard-bitten, proud, and suspicious, found themselves answering to a young woman who had endured more than most men ever would. They did not love her as they had loved Ned, but they respected her. And slowly, as word spread of how she held the castle, how she had outlasted both the Boltons and the winter, they began to trust her. Each night, the lords gathered at the long tables in the great hall. Wyman Manderley recited the latest news from White Harbor, while Lord Umber grumbled about wildlings, and Howland Reed listened, silent and watchful. Theon sat near the edge, close enough to be heard but always aware of the gulf that remained. When the talk turned to battles yet to come, he spoke plainly. "We hold the bridges at the White Knife and the fords at the last river. Scouts ride daily to Deepwood Motte and east to the Dreadfort's ruins. If the dead march again, we must not be caught unready." Jon Snow's arrival, unexpected, grim-faced, weary, had changed the mood of the keep. Jon rode at the head a battered column of Night's Watch, wildlings and Northmen. His news was as bleak as ever. The wall breached, Eastwatch lost, the dead regrouping somewhere in the haunted woods. Jon's eyes lingered on Sansa and Bran with something like relief, but he did not linger in the halls or the solar. He moved like a man shouldering the weight of the world. One frosted morning, Theon found Jon in the Godswood. The red leaves glimmered with ice, the air thick with the scent of sap and snow. Jon knelt before the heart tree, lips moving in silent prayer. When Jon rose, Theon approached him. They walked among the roots. "We're outnumbered," Jon said without preamble. "Even with the wildlings, even with every last Karstark and Manderley at our side. The dead have no fear, no hunger. If we break, there will be no second chance." Theon flexed his fingers, remembering the weight of the iron chains, the taste of defeat and despair. "We don't break," he said. "The dead came before. They broke against these walls. Winterfell will stand." Jon's mouth twitched in a faint smile. "I hope you're right." They paused at the pool, where the heart tree's face gazed down. Theon stared at the carving, the eyes bleeding red. "I owe this place everything," he murmured. "I once dreamed of ruling Winterfell, of taking it for my own. Now, all I want is to keep it safe." Jon looked at him, a strange tenderness in his eyes. "You've earned your place here, Theon. My father always said a man's worth is in what he does, not what others say of him. You proved yourself." Theon felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness, not entirely, but acceptance. A seed of peace, stubborn and slow to sprout. Preparations continued apace. Blacksmiths hammered day and night. Wildling archers practiced on the walls, their arrows finding targets fashioned from old barrels and crates. Women learned to fire crossbows and men to bind wounds. The crypts filled with grain, candles, and frightened children. Bran walked the halls in silence, sometimes stopping to touch a stone or gaze into the shadows, as if listening to the castle's heartbeat. One evening, as dusk turned the sky to blood and indigo, a horn sounded from the outer wall. Theon hurried to the gate, heart pounding, sword at the ready. A group of riders thundered up, their horses lathered, banners whipping, a golden kraken on black. Asha Greyjoy led them, eyes fierce, face drawn with exhaustion. She slid from the saddle and met Theon with a hard embrace. "I heard you'd gone soft," she said, but her voice trembled. "But here you are. And here I am. Our uncle Euron has seized Pike, driven out our father's men. There's nothing for us on the islands now, brother." "Ben?" Theon's voice was thick. "There is a place for you here, Asha. The north is not the sea, but it's all I have." She grinned, that wolfish, Ironborn grin. "Then let's show these wolves how to fight. My crew stands ready." Word of the Kraken's return spread swiftly. Some lords were suspicious, but the times were too dire for old grudges. Asha's Ironborn patrolled the rivers, set traps, and shared salt-hardened tactics with the North's own reavers. For the first time, the wolf and Kraken banners flew side by side from the ramparts. Snow fell again, heavy and unrelenting, as the first true sign of spring faded. One night, Bran summoned Theon to the solar. The room was lit by a single candle. Bran sat in his high-backed chair, hands folded. "I have seen things," Bran said, his voice quiet. "The dead gather near the weeping water. They are drawn to Winterfell, to us. There will be no peace until the Night King is destroyed." Theon's skin prickled. "And how do we do that? How do we kill a thing that is already dead?" "Fire," Bran said, eyes distant. "Illyrian. Deal. Dragonglass. Dot. And unity. If we break, if we fail each other, all is lost." "Venmando." Theon knelt before him. "Tell me what I must do." Bran's hand touched his shoulder. "Be who you are. Protect the living. Stand with the wolves." Word was sent to every corner of the north. Torches burned in the night, signaling the coming storm. Jon sent ravens to Dragonstone, begging for Daenerys Targaryen's aid, for her dragons and her fire. Sansa gathered the lords, each sworn to defend Winterfell, or die in the attempt. The eve before battle, the castle was tense with dread and anticipation. Fires blazed in every hearth. Sansa walked the walls, cloak billowing, hair shining copper in the torchlight. Theon found her on the parapet, looking south. "Do you fear what's coming?" she asked, voice soft as snow. He thought of Pike, of Dreadfort, of Winterfell burning and rebuilt. "Yes," he admitted, "but I won't run." Sansa nodded. "If we die tomorrow, let it be together. Let the world remember us as we are now." She reached for his hand, cold fingers entwining with his. They stood in silence, feeling the world shift beneath them. When dawn came, the sky was white and impenetrable, snow swirling like ash. The horns sounded, deep, terrible, endless. The dead marched, endless and merciless, their eyes blue as the frozen sea. The Night King rode at their head, a shadow upon a pale horse, his sword trailing darkness. The defenders of Winterfell gathered in the yard. Jon Snow, grim and unyielding, led the vanguard. Sansa stood with the women and children in the crypts, sword belted at her waist. Bran waited by the heart tree, his mind reaching beyond sight. Asha and her Ironborn manned the east gate, axes ready. Theon led the defense at the Godswood, flanked by Northmen and wildlings. He looked at Bran, sitting beneath the weirwood, and knew this was the end of all things, an old debt come due at last. The battle began in a storm of ice and steel. White swarmed the walls, falling to arrows and fire. The living screamed and died, rose and fought again, pushed back, rallied, broke, and reformed. The Night King strode through the chaos, untouched by blade or flame, his gaze fixed on the godswood. Theon fought until his arms shook, until blood blinded him. Around him his men fell, dying for a home that had never been theirs by right. Asha's axe flashed beside him, her war cry echoing through the trees. The dead pressed in, relentless. At last, Theon stood alone before Bran, a broken spear in his hands. The Night King approached, silent and cold, sword gleaming. Theon knew he would die, but he faced the darkness without regret. "For Winterfell," he shouted, charging. The Night King met him, and the world exploded in pain and darkness. When Theon opened his eyes, the world was changed. The dead were gone, the snow stained with ashes. Bran knelt beside him, eyes shining with tears. "You did it," Bran whispered. "You saved me. You saved us all." Theon tried to speak, but his strength was spent. He saw Jon standing over him, Sansa weeping, Asha kneeling, her hand clutching his. He smiled, feeling at peace for the first time. He was home. The living had prevailed. Winterfell stood. The story of Theon Greyjoy, the boy who betrayed, the man who redeemed, the kraken who fought for wolves, would echo in the halls for generations to come. As the snow melted and spring finally dawned, the survivors of Winterfell gathered to remember the dead and celebrate the living. Sansa, crowned Lady of Winterfell, knelt by the heart tree and whispered thanks for all who had given their lives. Jon led the rebuilding, his word law and hope both. Asha and her Ironborn became legends, the kraken blood that had saved the North. Rickon and Bran grew into men, haunted but wise, their childhood scars fading. And Theon Greyjoy's name, once a byword for betrayal, became a song sung in the long nights, a song of courage, sorrow, and the unbreakable bonds that hold the living together in the face of endless dark. Oh, Kay. The sun crept reluctantly over the eastern hills, gilding the battered stones of Winterfell in wan gold. Smoke still rose from the outer fields where the last pyres burned, carrying the memories of friend and foe alike on the chill wind. All that night and into the gray dawn, the living mourned, tending to wounds that would never truly heal, wounds of flesh, of heart, of history. But as spring at last nudged aside the ancient winter, new sounds echoed through the keep. The clatter of hammers, the laughter of children, the slow, steady hum of life beginning again. Theon's waking was fitful, torn between the peace of oblivion and the ache of returning to himself. When his eyes fluttered open, weak sunlight streamed across a simple room. A chamber in the broken tower, the bed stuffed with fresh straw, a basin of water set nearby. He was not dead. The realization sent a jolt through him, followed by pain, a deep, lancing ache that shot through his ribs and down his arm. Each breath was a gift and a curse. He blinked, vision blurry, until a shadow took shape by the bed. Sansa, ... Her hair, fire in the light. She reached out, her hand trembling before settling on his own. "You're awake," she said, 1,000 things unspoken in those 2 words. He tried to speak, but his mouth was dry. Sansa poured water and held it to his lips. The taste was clean, cold. His voice rasped when it finally came. "Is it over?" Sansa nodded. "The Night King is gone. The dead are gone. We survived." Her eyes glistened. "You saved Bran. You saved us all." He let out a shuddering breath. I thought I was dead." Her smile was as brittle as the first frost. "You very nearly were. But you would not let go." She squeezed his hand, hope and sorrow mingling. "Rest now, Theon. The castle is safe." She slipped out, but her presence lingered. Theon let the silence fill him, sinking into the soft murmur of the keep beyond the walls. Boots on stone, voices drifting like distant music, the bark of a dog somewhere in the bailey. He wept quietly. For the first time since the godswood, his tears lost in the rumpled blanket. Days blurred together in a haze of pain and fever. Maester Luwin, brought from near death himself, tended his wounds, muttering encouragement, feeding him broth, checking the scabs along his ribs. The healer's hands were gentle, their words rough. "You lost much blood, Greyjoy, but you gained more than you know. The North remembers." Jon visited once, silent and somber, nodding in approval. Bran appeared at dusk, silent as snowfall, his gaze distant, unfathomable. "You are free now," he said, touching Theon's brow. "Let go of the name you hate. You are who you choose to be." Rickon peered in, wild and awkward, before darting off to chase the hounds. Asha returned from the rivers and sat with him long into the night, recounting tales of the Ironborn who fought and died for a home that was not their own. "We're all ghosts here," she said, "but at least we haunt these halls together." As strength returned to his limbs, Theon forced himself from bed. He dressed in simple wool, belted a dagger at his hip, and limped through the keep. He found the walls crowded with new faces. Freedmen, wildlings, fisherfolk, even a few old enemies, now drawn to Winterfell's hope. Children played in the yard where once there had been only corpses. Black Lauren led a troop of boys in sword drill, his laughter rolling over the stones. The halls changed with the seasons. Sansa sat in the solar, parchment and ink always at her elbow, writing letters, issuing orders, speaking with lords who bent the knee not to a Stark maiden, but to the force of her will. Jon rode in and out, a shadow among men, carrying word of Queen Daenerys and her dragons, of new battles brewing beyond the horizon. Bran spent long hours in the Godswood, his mind wandering the winds of time, guiding the North with riddles and quiet prophecy. Theon found purpose in the ordinary. He patrolled the walls, counseled with the builders, saw to the defense of the new gates. He ate at Sansa's table, slept beneath the same roof as the wolves, and each day felt the old shame ease, replaced with something softer, less barbed. At the first thaw, Asha organized a hunt along the river, bringing down a great boar. Theon joined, his laughter ringing through the woods, the ache of battle slowly fading into the ache of living. He watched as Rickon, untamed but loyal, learned to lead the hounds and the wildlings alike. He stood with Bran beneath the heart tree, marveling at how a boy could become a legend and still crave a brother's hand. He knelt beside Sansa as she received the fealty of the Manderlys and the Karstarks, her smile tempered by wisdom and sorrow. He saw Jon, torn between North and South, duty and love, the ghost of Ned Stark's honor in his eyes. With each day, the shadow of his past receded, though never truly vanished. He did not forget the farm boys he had burned, the walls he had sacked, the pain he had caused. But he learned to carry it differently, not as a chain but as a scar, a sign of survival, a warning against pride. As spring deepened, word came that Queen Daenerys Targaryen rode north with her dragons, bringing fire and fear. Her host was vast, unsullied, and Dothraki. Knights of the Reach, sellswords from Lys and Myr. The banners of Baratheon and Tarly snapped beside the three-headed dragon, and Jon rode ahead to meet her at Moat Cailin. Winterfell braced for another war, uncertain if the queen brought salvation or conquest. Sansa prepared the keep for guests, wary but gracious. Bran watched the skies. Theon marshaled the men, reinforcing the gates, drilling the watchmen, making ready for siege or parley. When Daenerys arrived, her dragons circled the castle, their shadows swallowing the fields. Jon rode at her side, his face unreadable. The gates opened, and Sansa met the queen in the yard, every inch a Stark. Her words measured, her curtsy shallow. Daenerys swept through the castle, her silver hair bright in the gloom, her gaze sharp and hungry. She dined at Sansa's table, listened to Bran's riddles, inspected the walls. She met Theon with wary curiosity, hearing from Jon and others of his role in saving Winterfell. She questioned him closely, weighing his loyalty. "You are of the Ironborn, yet you fought for the North." She said. "Why?" Theon held her gaze, unflinching. "Because I am of both, but I am more than either. I chose to fight for the living." "Dane?" She studied him, her eyes like chips of frozen sky. At length she nodded. "Then, fight for me, too." The war is not yet won. He swore the oath, not for queen or crown, but for the people of Winterfell. The small folk, the wildlings, the children who played in the yard. For Sansa, for Bran, for Asha, for Rickon, for every name he had wronged and every bond he had remade. The days that followed were tense with the threat of battle and the hope of peace. Jon mediated between queen and sister, his loyalty torn. Daenerys pressed her claim for the Iron Throne. Sansa defended the North's independence. The lords gathered, old grudges simmering, new alliances forming in the long shadows of winter's end. One night, as the council argued in the great hall, Theon slipped away to the ramparts. He looked out over the fields, the snow nearly gone, the first crocuses daring the air. Asha joined him, her voice quiet for once. "We survived, little brother," she said. "Can you believe it?" He nodded. "Sometimes. Other times I feel the dead will rise again." "They always do," she replied. "But so do we." They stood in companionable silence as the night deepened, the castle behind them alive with the old and the new. On the first day of true spring, the folk of Winterfell gathered in the Godswood. The pyres were gone, the ground thawed and soft. Sansa knelt before the heart tree, offering prayers for the dead and thanks for the living. Bran stood at her side, his gaze far away, his presence grounding. Jon and Daenerys stood together, uneasy, but united. Theon joined the circle, Rickon's hand tight in his own. Asha stood beside them, her arms slung over his shoulder. As the sun broke through the last of the winter clouds, a hush fell over the yard. Sansa rose, her voice clear as the morning. "The North remembers," she said. "We have lost much, we have survived more. But today we look forward. Today we live." The crowd answered with a roar. Of hope, of relief, of a hunger for life that no darkness could swallow. Theon felt the truth of it like the warmth of the sun, steady and impossible. He had found his place at last, not as lord or prince, not even as a true Stark or a true Greyjoy, but as a man redeemed by pain and courage, by sacrifice and love. The scars would remain, as would the ghosts. But as laughter echoed through the Godswood and the banners fluttered above, Theon Greyjoy stood tall among the wolves, at home in the light. Oh, Ka. Summer's light crept steadily over the north, golden and pale, and with it a harvest richer than the region had known in years. Where graves had dotted the hills and burnt bones had blackened the snows, now wheat waved gently in the fields and fruit trees bent beneath their burden. From the wall to White Harbor, every holdfast and farmstead felt the stirring of life returned. At Winterfell, laborers rebuilt towers toppled by flame and frost, and children's games replaced the training cries of swordplay. The castle, once a tomb, then a fortress, now a sanctuary, grew vibrant with 1,000 daily rhythms. Theon moved through this new world with cautious wonder, still waking each morning half expecting a summons to the block or a cry for vengeance. Instead, he found nods of respect, the laughter of small folk, and the easy banter of men who had fought and bled beside him. Black Lauren no longer bore the grimness of a war captain, but told tales in the yard to clusters of rapt boys and girls, teaching them the knots and tricks of the sea. Asha had become a fixture at Sansa's table, her wit biting, her loyalty unshakable. At night she and Theon would walk the ramparts, speaking softly of ships lost and won, of brothers remembered, of the ever-restless call of the waves. Bran kept mostly to the Godswood, his sight as much in the distant past or possible future as in the present. He spoke little, save when wisdom or warning was needed, but his presence was a constant, a thread connecting the living to everything that had come before. Rickon was wild as ever, his hair sun-bleached, skin brown, wolfish grin flashing as he led a pack of children through the hayfields or set hounds after rabbits. He was a lord's son now, but the wildling in him could never be tamed. Sansa wore her new mantle lightly and well. She moved through the castle and the north with a natural authority, making peace between houses old and new, settling feuds, protecting the vulnerable. Where once her voice trembled with the weight of unspoken fears, now it rang with confidence. every word measured and clear. The people adored her, and the lords listened, sometimes grudgingly, but always with respect. Jon rode often with Daenerys, who had set her court at White Harbor for a season. Dragons wheeled in the summer sky, distant yet ever present, a promise of fire for friend or foe. Daenerys herself proved a cautious ally, her ambition tempered by the memory of winter's dead. Her council at White Harbor was a patchwork of Northmen, Riverlords, Reachmen, even Ironborn and Dothraki. A fragile peace held together as much by weariness as by hope. Theon found himself called to these councils. His name a byword for loyalty earned in blood. Daenerys listened to him, weighing his words with the caution of one who knows the cost of misplaced trust. "You know both sea and land," she said. "Tell me, Prince Theon, what does the North desire?" And he answered honestly. "Peace, stability, justice. A life where children could grow without the threat of axe or dragonfire." Through it all, Theon's bond with Sansa deepened, forged by trial and tested by time. She trusted him in matters large and small, sometimes seeking his counsel late at night over cups of sour northern wine, sometimes simply sitting in the godswood together as dusk painted the sky. Rumors grew, of a match, of a wedding, of the wolf and the kraken united at last, but neither spoke of it openly. Something old and wounded in Theon could not quite believe in such happiness, and Sansa, wise beyond her years, let the matter rest. One midsummer day, as the North prepared for the harvest festival, word came of unrest in the Iron Islands. Euron Greyjoy, defeated but not destroyed, had returned to Pike, gathering exiles and pirates, raiding the western coasts. Ships were burning, villages razed, and whispers spread of some dark power in Euron's wake. The news fell like a shadow over the sunlight. Asha was the first to react, her eyes cold and bright. "Hell never be satisfied," she told Theon in the rampart's shadow. "So long as Euron breathes, no coast is safe. No peace will last." "Bendamau," Theon nodded, a heaviness settling in his chest. "Hell come for us. For Winterfell, for you, for the North. He won't care about old debts, only power." Jon summoned council at once. The hall was full. Sansa at his right, Daenerys at his left, Bran calm and silent, Rickon fidgeting, Asha brooding. Lords of the North, Reach, and Riverlands sat shoulder to shoulder, the memory of the long night still shaping every decision. "The Iron Islands cannot be left to Euron," Jon said, voice low. "He's proved himself a servant of chaos, a breaker of oaths, a murderer of kin." Sansa's gaze flicked to Theon. "He won't stop until someone ends him." Asha spoke next, her tone icy. "Give me ships and men. Let me hunt him." Theon met her eyes, then turned to the council. "Let me go as well. Euron is my kin. If he must die, let it be by my hand. For the North, for Pike, for everything he's stolen." Daenerys nodded, her gaze inscrutable. "You have my leave. Take what you need." So it was decided. Theon would lead a fleet, Northmen and Ironborn both, to Pike, to root out Euron and end his threat. Asha sailed with him, their ships gliding swift and silent over the summer sea. The fleet gathered at Seaguard, black sails mingling with the wolf banners, swords and axes shining in the sun. Before he departed, Theon walked the walls of Winterfell one last time. He found Sansa waiting by the weirwood, her face calm but eyes stormy. "You do not have to go," she said softly. "I do," he replied. "If I don't face him, there will never be peace." She nodded, lips trembling. "Promise me you'll return." "I promise," he said, and for the first time he felt the words might be true. The voyage was swift, the seas restless beneath their hulls. Asha's ship led the way, banners snapping, her laughter wild as the wind. Theon stood at the prow, watching the horizon, memories of home and pain, and hope tangling in his chest. They reached the Iron Islands at dawn, fog curling around the black rocks. Pike loomed ahead, battered but defiant, Euron's banners waving from the towers. The battle was hard and brutal, Ironborn against Ironborn, axes and arrows flying, the sea stained red. Theon fought through the chaos, seeking his uncle, memory and hatred guiding his blade. He found Euron at the highest tower, mad-eyed and smiling, clad in black armor crusted with barnacles. So the prodigal Kraken returns. Euron crowed, raising his axe. "Come to kneel, nephew, or die?" Theon did not answer. He moved with a cold certainty of purpose, parrying Euron's blows, driving him back step by step. The tower shook beneath them as the battle raged below, the roar of the surf and the scream of gulls filling the sky. At last, Theon struck Euron down, axe biting deep, ending the madness with a final blow. Euron died laughing, cursing the gods and all the world. When it was over, Theon stood atop the tower, bloodied but unbowed, and looked out over the sea. A king who claimed no crown, a son who had found his own way. The battle's end saw Asha hailed as Queen of the Iron Islands, her claim now uncontested. She offered Theon a place at her side, a chance to rule as prince, but he shook his head. "My home is in the north," he said, "with the wolves." They burned Euron's body at the edge of the sea, the pyre's flames leaping high. Theon scattered the ashes himself, letting them drift on the tide, and felt the last weight of his old life fall away. He returned to Winterfell at harvest's height, the fields golden, the air heavy with promise. Sansa met him at the gate, relief and joy lighting her face. The people cheered his return, banners waving, drums echoing through the hills. That night, there was a feast in the great hall. Ale flowed, songs rose, and Theon sat at Sansa's side, laughter in his heart. When the music faded and the candles burned low, she leaned close and whispered, "You kept your promise." He smiled, and for once, there was no shadow between them. Autumn crept into the land, a gentle cooling, a reminder of winter's return. But for now, there was peace. Bran ruled with quiet wisdom, Rickon grew strong, Jon guarded the realm from beyond the wall, and Sansa led the north with grace and courage. Asha sent ships laden with gifts, trading salt for grain, iron for timber. Theon found himself at home at last, not as a lord, nor as a prince, but as himself. He walked the fields with Rickon, sailed the rivers with Asha, sat beneath the heart tree with Sansa, his past no longer a shackle but a story, a lesson for the future. He learned that redemption was not a single act, nor forgiveness a prize to be won, but a daily choice, a labor of years. The scars remained, but so did the love, hard-won, precious, enduring. As the snows of a gentler winter fell once more, Theon Greyjoy stood atop the walls of Winterfell, watching the land he had helped to save. He belonged here, in the heart of the north, among the wolves and the living, his soul at peace, his journey finally, beautifully complete. Inda, Esh, Endi, Al Wonder. Done. Winterfell stood golden and strong beneath the harvest sun, its towers outlined against an endless blue sky. The heat of high summer had faded, leaving the fields honeyed and cool, the air sharp with the promise of autumn's chill. The work of the living pressed on, wood chopped, wheat bundled, apples pressed into cider, barrels of salted fish hauled from the rivers and stored deep within the castle vaults. Life at Winterfell had become a tapestry of labor and laughter and music, a stark contrast to the ruin and terror that had preceded it. Theon Greyjoy felt the change in his bones, each morning waking less from nightmares and more to possibility. His name was no longer whispered in fear or scorn, but called with respect across the yard. He broke his fast with the castle folk, helping the children learn to fish in the moat or mend the fence for the goat pen. Some days he drilled with the guards, his voice carrying with the sharp ring of steel on steel. He spoke with lords and small folk alike, listened to their troubles, offered quiet advice. To his own surprise, he found himself content. Asha returned to the Iron Islands, her rule unchallenged and her letters to Theon growing warmer, touched by humor and nostalgia for the family they had nearly lost. She wrote of a people hungry for something other than conquest, a chance at peace, trade, a life not measured only in raids and reaving. She sent gifts north, salted cod, lamprey pies, and a finely wrought chain of black iron and gold that Theon wore beneath his jerkin, a token from a sister who knew every shade of his heart. Jon Snow rode south to treat with Daenerys at Old Town, carrying the promise of northern aid in the new queen's peace. Rickon remained in Winterfell, wild as ever, his friendship with the wildling boys and girls a bridge to the free folk who had settled in the hills nearby. Bran spent long hours in the Godswood, his mind more often in distant memory than present reality. But he was a source of comfort and quiet guidance for all. But it was Sansa who shaped the New North. She ruled with a firm but fair hand, her words gentle, her justice swift. She welcomed travelers and traders from the Vale, the Riverlands, even Dorne. She listened to the wives of soldiers lost in the wars, provided for orphans, hosted feasts for the children of smallfolk. Her beauty was famed, but it was her kindness and wit that drew suitors from across the realm. Sansa met them all with grace, but never promise. Her loyalty to Winterfell and her family was absolute. Her independence admired and respected. Theon felt a love for her, deep, steadfast, unburdened now by longing or shame. They shared a quiet companionship, often found in the Godswood or the Solar, talking of the past, the present, and the future. Sometimes they would sit for hours without words, the hush between them a comfort as familiar as the rhythm of their own breathing. One day, as the leaves turned gold and scarlet, word reached Winterfell of a gathering at Moat Cailin. The Queen's peace would be signed there, with every great house in attendance. Jon's letter was short and urgent. Sansa was summoned to witness, and Theon was to serve as her escort. Preparations were made quickly. Sansa dressed in a gown of deep green and gray, the direwolf of Stark embroidered in silver thread. Theon donned a surcoat of plain black and gray, a kraken brooch at his shoulder, Asha's chain hidden beneath his collar. Their company was small but proud. Rickon, tall and wild-haired now, rode with them, flanked by a dozen trusted guards and a handful of wildlings. The journey south was swift and uneventful. The King's Road was safe for the first time in years, patrolled by Queen's men in bright silver armor. Theon felt eyes upon him at every inn, every way stop. But the talk was friendly, the mood buoyant. News of Euron's defeat, of peace with the wildlings, and the promise of a bountiful harvest had lifted spirits everywhere. Moat Cailin was transformed from a place of ruin to one of pageantry. Great banners flew from rebuilt towers. The Lion of Lannister, the Dragon of Targaryen, the Rose of Tyrell, the Trout of Tully, the Sun and Spear of Martell, the Falcon of Arryn, and highest of all, the Direwolf of Stark. Daenerys herself presided in regal splendor, her dragon circling overhead at intervals, the spectacle thrilling and terrifying the assembled crowds. Jon greeted Sansa and Theon with an embrace. He looked older, more careworn, but the bond between the three was as strong as ever. Rickon darted off to join a knot of Riverland's children, his laughter bright as birdsong. The days that followed were a whirlwind of councils, feasts, tournaments, and negotiations. Theon kept close to Sansa, advising her quietly, letting her shine in the assembly halls. She spoke with a new authority, forging alliances, demanding better treatment for the North's smallfolk, ensuring her people would never again be pawns to southern ambition. At night, when the revels died and the halls grew quiet, Theon found himself wandering the old stones of the ruined keep, moonlight streaming through arrow slits. He thought of his first passage south as Ned Stark's ward, the eager boy who believed he could be everything to everyone. Now at last, he was content simply to be himself. On the eve of the Queen's peace, Daenerys summoned Sansa and Theon privately. The Dragon Queen regarded them with searching eyes. "You both know war and sorrow," she said. "You have lost much and endured more. Will you stand with me as I bind the realm? Will you lend your strength to the peace I make?" "Then," Sansa spoke first, "the North will always guard its freedom, but I will stand beside you so long as you remember that every realm's strength is in the justice given to its weakest." Daenerys nodded, then turned to Theon. "You chose the living over the dead, the wolf over the kraken. What is your answer, Theon Greyjoy?" He bowed his head, feeling the weight and freedom of the moment. "I have no crown, no claim, but I give you my word. I will defend the peace you make, for the sake of the living, and the memory of the dead. Ben? The queen smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. Then let it be so. The peace was signed the next day. Banners dipped, horns sounded, and cheers echoed across the fens. Treaties were sworn, marriages arranged, old grudges buried, at least for a time. The feast lasted until dawn, the music wild and sweet. Theon danced with Sansa beneath the lanterns, her eyes bright with hope. They returned to Winterfell to find the harvest in full swing, the people eager for tales of the South and the Queen's peace. Theon walked the fields with Rickon, teaching him the names of every tree, every bend in the river. He sat with Bran by the heart tree, silent, but never alone. He helped Black Lauren lead the children in games and built a new skiff with his own hands, launching it on the lake under the watchful eyes of the castle. Years passed. Theon's hair grew streaked with gray, his face lined but serene. Sansa remained the Lady of Winterfell, beloved by her people, her wisdom a steady flame in the heart of the North. Rickon grew to manhood, Bran to legend. Asha ruled the Iron Islands in peace, her ships now carrying trade and news instead of war. The world turned as it always did. There were hard winters and lean harvests, wild storms and stubborn feuds, but the North endured. The story of the Kraken who saved Winterfell was told at every fireside, a lesson and a warning both. A tale of pride, of pain, of redemption. And when Theon grew old, and his days slowed, he would walk the walls at dusk, the banners of wolf and kraken rippling above, and smile at all he had helped to build. He knew at last that home was not blood nor birth, but the place where one's heart was welcomed, one's soul forgiven. As snow fell gently upon the battlements, Theon Greyjoy, son of Pike, protector of Winterfell, closed his eyes in peace, surrounded by the love of his chosen family, a part of the North forevermore. A.K. The first snows of winter fell early that year, cloaking the North in white silence before the last apples had even been pressed. At Winterfell, the harvest was safely gathered, and cellars packed with grain and salted meat. But the air carried a hush, a memory of harder seasons, when snow meant hunger and every wind brought grief. Theon awoke to frost feathered on the window, the scent of wood smoke drifting through the keep. He rose before dawn, dressing in layers, and crossed the empty yard as the sun's first gold touched the sky. He found Sansa in the godswood, her breath a cloud in the cold, her hands clasped before the heart tree. She turned as he approached, her face pale but peaceful, the red leaves dusting her shoulders. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she murmured. He nodded, gazing at the old tree's carved face. "The snow always makes it seem as though the world's been washed clean. For a little while," she agreed. "Until the next storm comes." They stood together in companionable silence, listening to the crows in the branches, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Theon felt the simple comfort of being here beside her, no words required, nothing left to prove. After a time, Sansa took his arm and led him back toward the castle, their footprints the first to mark the new snow. In the kitchens, warmth and noise welcomed them. Gilly oversaw the baking, her hands dusted with flour, while Rickon and a clutch of children begged scraps from the cooks. Theon smiled, accepting a slice of honeyed bread, and listening to the chatter. The talk of wolves seen beyond the broken tower, of wildlings trading furs and stories in the yard, of the Manderley ships soon to arrive up the White Knife with spices and news. The peace forged at Moat Cailin endured. Daenerys' rule in the south brought stability, if not always love, and her dragons ranged far afield, the terror of the narrow sea pirates and the Iron Islands rivals alike. Jons and regular ravens, sometimes with parchment inked in his own hand, describing the work of holding a kingdom together, his growing family with Daenerys, his dreams for the realm. Each letter was read aloud by the fire, the words passed from hand to hand as if each was a treasure. Asha's fleet sailed from Pike to the Arbor and back again, bringing olive oil and sweet wine north in exchange for hard timber and smoked hams. She sent word whenever she could, a wry joke about soft Northmen, a boast of the fastest ship in Westeros. the assurance that the old ways were gone for good. She had even invited Sansa to visit Pike the coming spring, promising a feast fit for queens and krakens alike. Bran grew stranger with every year, but his wisdom was a balm for all the North's wounds. Lords and maesters alike sought his counsel. Sometimes he vanished for days in the woods, returning with a cryptic word or a faint, knowing smile. When Theon pressed him, Bran only said, "All things pass, Theon. Even winter." The world outside changed, but Winterfell's days settled into gentle routine. Theon walked the walls at dawn and dusk, his boots leaving the first and last tracks in the snow. He joined in the council, helped judge disputes over fields and hunting grounds, rode out to distant villages when illness or hardship struck. His presence was never questioned. He had become as much a part of the castle as the old stones or the weirwood. He and Sansa shared the labor of rule, sometimes with laughter, sometimes with tears. There were hard decisions, a year's blight in the barley, a dispute between wildlings and Northmen, a sick child brought to the maester too late. Sansa's strength was unflagging, but when she faltered, Theon was there to steady her, his words a comfort, his loyalty a shield. On long, cold nights, they would meet in the solar or at the fireside, sometimes with Rickon sprawled beside them, other times alone. They spoke of dreams for the North, of founding a school for the children of freedmen and wildlings, of sending ships farther east, of building roads to link the remote villages through winter. Each idea was tested in debate, then quietly, patiently, made real. One evening, as snow fell thick against the windows, Sansa entered Theon's chamber carrying a flagon of mulled wine. "The council wants you to take a keep of your own," she said. "Carhold or Deepwood Moat. They say you've earned it." Theon shook his head, smiling. "My place is here, Sansa. Winterfell needs both of us." She poured the wine, her fingers brushing his. "I'm glad," she said quietly. They sat in the firelight, a comfortable silence between them. Outside the wind howled, but within these walls there was peace. That winter was long, but not cruel. The stores held, the people grew stronger. When spring finally returned, the rivers rushed with meltwater. Wildflowers sprang up in the meadows, and the world seemed to exhale at last. In the spring, a delegation arrived from the Iron Islands. Asha herself, resplendent in sealskin and silver, her hair windblown, laughter booming through the halls. She brought gifts: fine wool, pearls, bottles of Myrish rum, and a retinue of Ironborn, who marveled at the green abundance of the North. A feast was held in her honor. The tables groaned with food, the great hall echoing with song and laughter. Asha toasted Theon, her voice carrying to every corner. He saved the North, and he saved the Iron Islands from their own madness. He's Kraken and Wolf, salt and snow, a better man than any of us dreamed. Dai. Theon flushed, but Sansa smiled beside him, pride clear in her eyes. As the summer advanced, word came of a new threat. Raiders from Essos preying on the narrow sea, pirates flying false banners and attacking ships bound for White Harbor and Pike alike. Daenerys sent a raven requesting aid, and the North responded with men and ships, the Ironborn fleet at their head. Theon, older now but unbowed, sailed with Asha one last time, guiding his crew with calm authority. They met the pirates at sea, the battle fierce but brief. The northern arrows and Ironborn axes made short work of the raiders. Their ships burned and sunk. Theon returned triumphant, his place as protector of both sea and land secure. Years passed. Rickon married a wildling girl, their children tumbling through Winterfell's courtyards with pups and wolfhounds. Bran's fame spread beyond the North, called the Wise, the Green Seer, the hand behind 1,000 quiet victories. Jon and Daenerys ruled the South, their realm mostly at peace, though the dance of politics never ceased. Sansa's hair turned silver at the temples. Her eyes deepened with the wisdom of winters weathered and summers survived. She remained Lady of Winterfell, beloved and revered. She never married, though many had hoped, and her love for Theon became a legend in its own right, unspoken perhaps, but unbreakable. Theon's years grew long. When his strength finally waned, he took solace in the Godswood. sitting beneath the heart tree as the sun set and the shadows lengthened. The children of Winterfell, both wolf and kraken kin, sat at his feet, clamoring for stories. He told them of his youth, the salt winds of Pike, the snowfalls of Winterfell, the long night, the day when the dead were vanquished and hope returned. He told them how a broken man could find forgiveness, how courage sometimes meant living on and making peace. When his last day came, the castle paused. Bells rang, voices hushed, the halls filling with memories and gratitude. Sansa sat with him at the last, her hand in his, as gentle and steadfast as ever. "You were my true friend, Theon," she whispered, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You saved us all." He smiled, breath faint, voice little more than a ghost. "Home," he said, "at last." And so, Theon Greyjoy passed from the world, neither prince nor lord, but something rarer and finer. A hero of Winterfell, mourned by kraken and wolf alike. His name carved in the heartwood of the old gods, and sung at every hearth where tales of courage and love and redemption are told. The North endured and flourished and remembered, and the wind over Winterfell, rising from sea and snow, whispered his name for generations to come. Oh, Ka. Summer deepened, the days growing long and lush, and the North drank in the warmth as though it could never be spent. The world beyond Winterfell changed, as it always did. Kings and queens married, borders shifted, distant wars flickered in the south. But the life within those old gray walls endured in the constancy of harvests, hearth fires, and the bonds of those who called it home. Theon awoke each morning before the bells rang for work, content in the simple rhythm of his days. He rode the circuit of the outer fields, checked on the new stonework at the gatehouse, and sometimes waded knee-deep into the cold rivers with the fishermen, showing them how to mend a net or cast for pike. He trained with the young squires, sparred with Rickon, now a man full-grown and swift as any wolf, and with Asha's visits from the Iron Islands, even practiced his old sea knots, teaching the wildling children to climb ropes and balance on planks. Winterfell had become a place of laughter, and wherever he walked, folk greeted him as one of their own. One autumn afternoon, Theon found himself standing at the parapet with Bran, looking out over the gold and russet woods, the fields dotted with gleaners. Bran's gaze, deeper than years, lingered on the horizon where the hills met sky. "It's all changed, hasn't it?" Theon said, not expecting an answer. But Bran smiled, serene and mysterious. "The shape of things always changes, Theon, but the heart remains. The roots beneath the snow. The love you sowed here is deeper than any grave." Theon nodded, accepting the words with gratitude and humility. Bran had become a legend to the north, a healer, a judge, and a silent watcher in the Godswood. The castle pulsed with his quiet wisdom, the children drawn to him for stories and riddles, the lords seeking his counsel when old feuds flared anew. Life was not always easy. The seasons of peace were tested by drought and floods, by a strange sickness that swept through the small folk one spring. When famine threatened the distant mountain villages, Sansa and Theon rode out with wagons of grain, braving storms and bandits, bringing hope where hunger had begun to settle. Their presence, Lady of Winterfell, and the kraken who had become her brother, brought order and reassurance, and in their wake the wildlings and Northmen mingled more freely, the old distrust easing into respect. It was at the close of one such journey, as the first frost silvered the grass, that Sansa lingered with Theon beneath the heart tree. The red leaves whispered overhead, and the dusk pressed in, heavy with scent of earth and wood smoke. "I never thought I would see the North at peace," she said, her hands folded in her lap. "Not truly. Not in my lifetime." "Benduan." He turned to her, the lines of age soft around his eyes. "You gave them peace, Sansa, and you taught me what it means to belong." She smiled, a gentle private thing, and leaned her head against his shoulder. They sat together until the stars pricked the sky, silent, wrapped in memories of all they had survived. That winter, Rickon wed his wildling bride before the heart tree. The whole of Winterfell gathered to witness. The celebration was fierce and wild. Mead and music, old songs, dances that spun into the coldest hours of night. Theon stood beside Sansa in the feast hall, watching Rickon, no longer the half-wild child, but a man strong and kind, raise his cup to toast their family and the new age they had carved from blood and hope. Children came, filling the castle with a riot of voices and footsteps, chasing puppies through the bailey and daring each other to sneak into the crypts. Asha visited more often, sometimes staying a month or more, her laughter ringing down the corridors as she shared wild tales of the sea. Each time she returned, she brought gifts, a carved whale bone, a tapestry woven on the islands, a necklace of black pearls for Sansa. Her presence reminded them all that peace could be as fierce as war, if tended with courage. Theon felt a growing ease in his soul, a peace he had never thought possible. At times, when a ship's horn sounded from the White Knife, or he caught the scent of brine on the wind, old longings stirred in his chest. But always, the sound of Sansa's voice, the sight of Winterfell's banners, drew him home. He had no need to seek elsewhere. When the first rumors of trouble reached them, pirates gathering off the stepstones, a quarrel between lords in the Reach, a fire in Old Town, Sansa and Theon met it with calm vigilance. Messengers rode in and out, letters were sent, riders dispatched, but the walls of Winterfell held. They prepared as they always had, but the realm beyond their borders seemed farther away, its chaos unable to touch the heart of the North. Bran's wisdom steered them through small storms. When Sansa fell ill with a fever one bleak January, it was Bran who sat by her bed, whispering stories of the old days, and Theon who refused to leave her side. She recovered, and with the spring, her strength seemed doubled, her laughter lighter, her steps more sure. As the years passed, Theon's hair turned white, and his steps slowed. He became a fixture of the castle, often found on the ramparts at dawn, nodding to the guards, or walking the halls in the quietest hour before sunrise. He was the teacher of all the young, the confidant of the old, and the steady hand on every troubled shoulder. Children, Rickons, Ashas, even wildlings, clamored for stories of the old days. He told them not only of dragons and dead things and bitter winters, but of how the North had endured through stubbornness, kindness, and forgiveness. He spoke of how love could heal what war had broken, and how a man could change, even when haunted by the past. One summer evening, as twilight lingered, Sansa and Theon walked in the Godswood. The old heart tree stood silent, watching, as it always had. "Do you regret it?" Sansa asked quietly. "Staying here, making your home among us?" Theon shook his head, a soft smile on his lips. "I could have died 1,000 ways, Sansa, but I lived. I lived because I belonged to Winterfell, to you, to all of this. I have no regrets." She reached for his hand, her own lined but strong. "You are my true friend, Theon. My brother, in every way that matters." Tears pricked his eyes, but he let them fall, unashamed. "And you are my family. My light." The seasons turned. Sansa's hair silvered, her beauty settling into the lines of wisdom and laughter. Rickon's children became men and women, fierce and bright-eyed, spreading the story of Winterfell's resilience far and wide. Asha grew older, her ships still prowling the seas, but always returning home to the north. When Theon's last winter came, the snows were deeper than in many years. The people of Winterfell gathered, old and young, kraken and wolf, wildling and freeborn alike, to keep him company in his final days. He faded gently, his hand held by Sansa, surrounded by laughter and stories, the voices of the children echoing in the stone corridors. He closed his eyes to the song of the wind in the weirwood, the scent of pine and hearthsmoke, the feeling of belonging at last. Sansa kissed his brow and whispered, "Rest now, Theon. You are home." The bells rang for him, as they had for Eddard Stark and the kings of old. His name joined theirs in song and story, carved in the stone and remembered in the heart. He was not mourned as a prince or a lord, but as a friend, a brother, a man redeemed. The North endured. Its fields greened, its wolves howled, its children laughed and grew. And in every corner of Winterfell, Theon's legacy lingered. Proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, that love could overcome even the longest night, and that the measure of a life was not in titles, but in the hearts it touched. So the years rolled on, peace settling deep as roots, the wind singing through the godswood, the old Kraken's name carried on the breath of every northern child. Theon Greyjoy, protector of Winterfell, brother of wolves, home at last.